Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another Walking Dead video. So in this one here, I wanted to talk about what Andrew Lincoln had to say regarding returning to the Walking Dead, I guess, universe in general. And yeah, it seems like a season 2 is going to be happening. I think a lot of people felt like season 2 wasn't going to happen because of the way it ended, but it seems like it's more of a thing that they have to write the next story, right? So I think what Andrew Lincoln and Danai Gurira are very interested in right now is they want to release, like, you know, if they're releasing a season, like seasons that are like really like complete, you know what I mean? Like they don't want to be a part of I guess like a long running show that's sort of coming out every single year kind of thing, right? And I think that makes sense because they spent, you know, nearly a decade doing that. And so they want, you know, to focus on just like sort of having these like, you know, really epic chapters of these stories sort of released, and they want to work on the story to make the story really incredible. And based off of all their comments here, that seems to be what it is. Danai Gurira actually talked about, you know, what the characters would be doing now, basically after The Ones Who Live, because I know she doesn't want to talk about a season 2 or anything like that. Like she even says, you know, like I can't answer that, and it's sort of my job to misdirect you and all that. And I think it's, you know, a lot of that I feel like is contract stuff. And what she says actually, and I'm pretty sure that was in a comicbook.com interview, but she was asked about what the characters would be doing now, like after The Ones Who Live, and she had a whole opinion on it. It was kind of interesting. Like she said that, you know, the characters would probably feel more obligated to, you know, they have to live their family life, but they also have to go and like help out the CRM and, you know, a lot of that, and just sort of, you know, because they have a responsibility to do those things, right? So I found that stuff very interesting because I kind of, that you can see where a season 2 would be set up there, right? The CRM arc, I will be doing a video on the CRM. I do want to talk about how I think that they definitely failed that arc entirely, but I think they could fix that in the future for sure, because obviously the CRM, they're not completely wiped out, so they could still do some stuff there in the future. But yeah, so yeah, a lot to talk about here. So obviously make sure to be a subscriber if you want to get all of my Walking Dead content like this. Also, one quick note that I wanted to make actually is that if you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, definitely go do so. I do a podcast obviously every single week. Episodes release every single Monday, and we just did a podcast special, and yeah, all I'll say is that I made Negan's Lucille, and yeah, that was a lot of fun. So if you're interested in a podcast by me, then yeah, definitely consider subscribing. I will leave a link to that in the description of this video. So Andrew Lincoln, in an interview with The Hollywood Reporter, was asked about I guess the future of Rick Grimes. The question is, after all, what's going to happen when Rick finds out Daryl and Negan are out there in the universe? And Andrew Lincoln responds with, "That's very astute and something we spoke at length about," says Lincoln. "There's a few surviving personalities still in the universe, and it would be extraordinary to have them all breathe the same air at some point. It could be an absolutely tremendous, traumatic reunion of sorts." So I like what he says here because, I mean, Andrew Lincoln and Danai Gurira don't want to talk about a season 2 because I think, again, I think it is contract stuff. It's not that they don't really want to talk about it. It's just that they can't answer it, right? And I think it's because they have worked on a lot of stuff. And Andrew Lincoln said something here that was very interesting because, I mean, if you look at The Ones Who Live, that story is just about Rick and Michonne and eventually reuniting with their family, right? But if you look at what he said here, he said that they actually spoke at length about the fact that Daryl and Negan are out there, right? So that's very interesting because that wasn't a part of this story here, but that seems to be the next part of the story, right? They all seem to be very open. That's why when they talk about this, it's like, you know, it's very much a complete story, but there could be more, right? Like it makes a lot of sense looking back at it now. It's like, yeah, because this sort of ended that arc that they wanted to tell, right? Like they really wanted to, I guess, tell, you know, the story of how Rick got home, right? So Rick is now home, and obviously there's going to be a lot of people that he runs into. So there's a lot of things there that I do want to see, and that's the stuff that I hope they don't ignore, because that's the stuff that fans want to see. You don't want to just randomly pick up with a season 2, and then Rick's already, you know, he's already seen Gabriel and everyone else. I want to see, you know, a story where he's sort of seeing them for the first time, like the first time he sort of walks home and what that is, right? I really do want to see that. So that's going to be a very interesting next part of the story here. And I think it just makes sense that they're all very interested in what the next story could be here. And if you actually look into, you know, a further comment here, this is actually in an interview by EW. Now, I'm not going to read the whole thing here because it's actually a lot. It's a huge quote here that I have. But basically what he says is that, you know, like he wants them to sort of breathe the same air again. It's sort of the same thing he said before, like in terms of like Daryl and Negan and stuff. Like he wants all those characters to sort of, you know, be in a scene together again, but it would have to be a really exciting story. Like that story would have to be just like this. Like if he's going to do a season 2, it has to be just like what we just got here in this first season here. So that's really, really exciting. You know, what he says exactly is he's not necessarily ready to put a timetable on it yet, which I think is definitely a very important part to this here. I think that's why there was no season 2 like renewal or anything like that, because again, the story has to be right. I don't think we're going to be waiting 6 years again. Like, I don't think we're going to be waiting until 2030 for this next part, right? It's definitely going to be up before that, but I think that they're going to like just kind of sit and relax and focus on what this story is going to be here. And Andrew Lincoln actually says at the very end here that, or this article says, continues Lincoln, that was thrilling that we did episodes and sequences that I'm intensely proud of and we haven't seen before. If that were to come out of Gimple's or Denai's brain and it was irresistible, then I think that there's infinite chance that it might happen again, but I don't know when. So again, that's kind of where we're at. I think what this is it really is a story thing. It's sort of a timing thing, but again, if it's been 4 years from now, like, I think that's too long, right? Like, in 4 years from now, it's not going to be like, okay, now we're confirming a season 2. I think, a season 2 might not be announced for another year, or maybe they wait until Comic-Con. I don't know. I don't know what the timeline is going to be of all of this here. Right now, we're just going to have to wait for updates and stuff, right? Like, Comic-Con, I think, is the next point where, they could announce some stuff. That's going to be obviously in July. I think we'll get an update because they'll be asked about it, right? There might be other spin-off shows and stuff that they might do in the meantime, but I think that that's probably going to be something that is asked. And so I don't know if they'll have an update there, but obviously like Comic-Con of like 2025, right? I think they definitely will have an update at that point because it's been like a year and a half. And I think that's where some of the story stuff could probably, a lot of that could be worked out. And that's where some plans, can actually be made here. So I think that everything right now in terms of a season 2 is sort of in like early production in a sense. Like, obviously nothing's official, but Gimple has a bunch of ideas. And I think Danai Gurira, based off of her comment anyways, she seems to have ideas on where it would go. And I do think they would be the main ones writing this. And my guess, honestly, is that this comes out in late 2026 or probably 2027. That's sort of my guess here, because it seems like we are actually going to be getting this, like, for sure. It's something that for sure is going to be happening. I just wonder how everything else is going to play out, right? Like, I wonder how a lot of the other story is going to play out, because I think that also factors into a lot, right? Like, if they do a season 2, will Daryl and Negan be a part of it, right? Maybe it's only some of them, right? Because Daryl is in France right now, so I think it depends on a lot of that. And, they still could tell a really interesting story here with all the characters from The Walking Dead, and then you have Morgan show up, right? And there could be some interesting things there. But again, you have to have the villains there and all that. Like, it's going to be a new story. There's going to be some really new, exciting stuff here. There is the triple P card and all of that. So I do wonder what that is, because there seems to be a connection with the CRM. There's the whole thing with Beale's spies, but I do wonder if some of that has changed and if that's going to be more of a new villain here, right? So I'm interested in where that goes, and that seems to be the next focus here. And that is one thing that Gimple actually has been saying a lot recently, which I find very, very fascinating, which is, and I saw this in an interview from The Wrap, so again, I'll leave a link down below to this article as well, but in this interview, he was talking about, the future of The Walking Dead and whether or not we'll get a Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live Season 2 and all that, and basically sort of what he says is, I'd love to do more classic characters in very different situations, but with those same sort of Walking Dead story values, Gimple said. That said, I do have insane ideas that have nothing to do with any of that. I like doing both, but I think we've had an emphasis on the experimental. I would love to do more classic stuff for a little while, which I think is probably going to be the case for the next year or two, as I think there's going to be more classic Walking Dead stories told. And you can kind of see that with the Daryl Dixon season 2 teaser. Dead City is definitely very classic Walking Dead, where I think it's going to be more simple stories, right? And then eventually you'll kind of have, I feel like Dwight, there's a good chance he could be in season 2 just because he's going back to the sanctuary. It makes sense that you could probably focus on a story there. There's quite a bit of stuff that they're able to do, and I think they want to focus, or Gimple said anyways, that he wants to focus more on just telling more classic Walking Dead stories like that, just kind of simple stuff, which honestly, I will say I am kind of on board with as well, because The Ones Who Live was really insane. It really was, but you got to balance that. You really do. When you look at Marvel, it's really been just so insane for so long, right? Like, there's been so much just multiverse stuff and everything that's been happening that eventually you just kind of get exhausted from all of it, because you can't keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, right, with the story. I Dragon Ball Z is a TV show that I loved as a kid. I mean, I love it now too, but it was sort of the same thing. You know, you had to keep getting stronger and stronger and stronger. Like, it was something that it's definitely, I think it's smart to balance it out as much as you can. And I agree with that. The CRM arc was really crazy. Like, what are you going to do? Go like even bigger and bigger and bigger? Like, eventually you're going to get to a point where you kind of have to stop. So you do want to balance it and tell really interesting stories. And I think, you know, sort of, you know, like the Varian Walker stuff is still really crazy, but like in terms of the technology part to it, maybe don't, you know, get into the whole like helicopter thing and all of that. Like, that part is still there. The CRM is still there. That will probably still play a role. I mean, not probably, it's going to play a role in a season 2, obviously, of The Ones Who Live. But I think for now, just focus on telling like these very simple stories here. And based off of what they're saying here, that seems to be, you know, what is going to be the case. And I think there is more to tell here, obviously. I mean, if you read the quote from before, Andrew Lincoln did say that if there is going to be a season 2, it has to be the same thing as, you know, what they just did. And I would say that, yeah, I think that does make sense. I think he more means like just how intense the story was. And I do agree with that. It would have to be done in a very, very very similar way, and they just have to make the story just that much more complete, I feel like. And I'm really interested in what they come up with. I mean, there is still a lot of stuff here, but that's what's going to be fun now, is watching The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon and Dead City. Like, Daryl Dixon will probably have some connections here and there, but because it's located in France, it's going to be hard to sort of see some of the world building stuff just from there, because obviously there's not a lot of connections to America. But you know, just in terms of what they set up there, that could be, you know, just really setting up a lot of stuff here for obviously whenever they do a season 2, if it's in like 2 or 3 years from now, right? So that is what I'm really interested in right now. And also, you know, in terms of Dead City, that's going to be a show that I feel like we should really watch, right? Because the CRM stuff could start to come up in there. You know, there was a lot of talk about Beale spies, and a lot of that, you got to wonder if the Dama is that. Like, you know, the Dama basically owns New York City, but she wants Negan to help her with all of that. Beale has spies all over, you know, the world, literally. Like he says the continent, but then afterwards he says the world. So, and they're around major cities and major communities and all that are sort of keeping an eye on everything and can influence people to change into, you know, doing this or whatever, or maybe they have to wipe out a community if they have to, right? So that's a very, very interesting, you know, line there. I think Gimple put that there for a reason. And that could definitely come up in season 2 here. The Dama could have a connection there. And I just wonder, like, obviously the CRM, like, they're good now, but not entirely. Like, they're good in the sense that they don't allow people to just stay there. Like, you're able to leave if you want. But there's still the whole, you know, just how everything operates is still going to be a thing. There's still going to be some secrets there that they can't tell everyone. It's just that they're not as evil as they were. They're not going to be wiping out communities and all of that. So that stuff is gone. But there's obviously going to be people who disagree. There's going to be these moments where, you know, you have like a lot of people who really, really support Major General Beale, right? And are just upset about what happened. And so that's where things get really, really interesting here. Honestly, like, that final episode could be something really, really big for the future. And I'm really interested in seeing where that goes here. I still don't like what happened, but I can see how they can turn it into something really incredible here. So anyways, I'll leave it here. Definitely post all your thoughts down below on your predictions for a season 2. And again, it might not even be a season 2. It might just be like another show that's like 6 episodes, hopefully 8 episodes. But if it's 6 episodes, whatever. Like, it might just be called The Walking Dead, I don't know, something else, right? Like, they might just do it like that. I would prefer them to do a Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live season 2, personally, but it depends on the timing of it. Like, if they wait, you know, 2 or 3 years to announce it, then maybe the show feels kind of outdated and they want to go with a newer title, right? I don't know. It really depends. I think that The Ones Who Live was a really incredible story, but you also don't want to have all of these spinoffs out there, like these random stories here and there, and you're just wondering, well, how does all this connect? But I think, you know, maybe the thinking could be, well, I want to treat these, you know, these limited series or whatever as like movies, basically, right? Like The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live was a movie told in a 6-episode format. The next part's going to be the second movie. And maybe that's kind of where they're going here with this. Like, that's sort of the story here, right? They're going to do 3 probably overall, because I can see them doing that. Like, the next one might be, I don't know if it's going to have everyone in it, you know, because Daryl and Negan and Maggie, Carol, like, they're kind of all everywhere. And there's other characters that could also be in it right away, like Morgan and, you know, Ezekiel, everyone else. Like, you can definitely focus more on that for a season 2. And then that's where I think the third movie of, you know, the limited series trilogy maybe is how they're viewing it. Maybe that could be sort of where everyone is all together, and then we see sort of how all of this ends, right? I could see that. So maybe it's not the ones who live season 2 or the ones who live season 3. There will be 2 new limited series eventually, and it's all going to be a part of like this like trilogy of limited series, right? And I think that's honestly overall better than, you know, getting a Rick movie trilogy, which would have been like, you know, 3 2-hour films, right? So I do prefer, if it ends up being the case, if that ends up happening, that's definitely best case scenario. And it seems like we're very close to doing that. They're very open to doing a season 2. And it looks like right now they're just working on the story. And Gimple has a lot of ideas here. And we're just going to have to wait for an announcement. And right now, that's kind of the part that we're at. We're just going to be speculating for who knows how long. Hopefully it's only like a couple of months, but maybe it's a year. Hopefully it's not 4 or 5 years. And yeah, obviously we're all going to be waiting for that next moment here, right? But anyways, post all your thoughts down below. Hope you guys all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.